This week on The Aviators, Curtis heads to Penn Yan Aero as we look at why aircraft engines are so reliable.
They're severely over-engineered. There's many redundant systems on these aircraft engines.
Raylene visits the Oshawa Municipal Airport, the world's most female-friendly airport. And I look at buying a used aircraft and all of the things that you can do to make it your own. Previously, Sarah looked at the differences between single and twin-engine aircraft. A large part of her multi-engine training involved learning how to fly a twin when one engine fails. But most of the general aviation aircraft out there are single-engine aircraft. And unlike twins, if that one engine fails, all of your forward thrust is gone. Any way you look at it, an engine failure on a twin or a single-engine aircraft is not a good thing. You're not going to find yourself simply sitting in the middle of the street when your aircraft's engine fails. Because of this, the engines in factory-certified aircraft are all built to be extremely reliable with built-in redundancies and requirements for the engine to be overhauled after a certain number of hours. One shop that does overhauls is Penn Yan Aero, a family-run business that goes back 3 generations. Current company president Bill Middlebrook is the grandson of Harold Middlebrook, who started Penn Yan in 1945.
Bill, what makes an aircraft engine so reliable?
Well, you know, Curtis, these engines have been around for decades now. They're severely over-engineered. There's many redundant systems on these aircraft engines to help keep the pilots and the passengers safe.
When it comes to piston aircraft engines, there are 2 main manufacturers that general aviation aircraft will use, Continental and Lycoming. These 2 companies have produced the majority of the aircraft engines used in general aviation aircraft since the 1950s. Most of their engines were designed in the 50s and 60s and are now tried and true. Penn Yan performs overhauls on both manufacturers' engines and have people from all over the world ship engines to their New York facility.
So here we are in the warehouse, and this is basically where all our engines come in when they first arrive here, and this is also where all the engines are shipped out. When the engines first arrive here, every engine goes through a detailed check-in. We open up the crate, see what we've got, take pictures, make a list, copy down everything from part numbers, serial numbers, engine models, pieces and parts, extra parts that might have come in with the engine. From there, the engines go to the teardown.
That sounds like the fun part where you get to take it apart and see what's inside.
Tear it all apart, that's right.
Let's go have a look.
All right.
All aircraft engines have what's called a TBO, or time before overhaul. This is an hour count on when the aircraft engine will need to be overhauled. For Lycoming and Continental engines, this is usually between 1,400 and 2,400 hours. Once an engine hits this time, it may need to go to a facility like Penn Yan, where they will disassemble, inspect, clean, and replace various parts of the engine.
So Bill, in the disassembly shop, we can actually get a good look at one of the engines that comes in. What type of engine is this?
This is a 0360 F1A6 found in one of your typical 170, 172 Cessnas. And this engine is a 360 cubic inch engine, makes 180 horsepower. You can see here things like this is a carburetor, similar to what you might find on an automotive engine. This is the ignition system here. These are called magnetos. There's actually 2 magnetos on this engine, which allows for some redundancy in case there's ever a problem with the ignition system. These are the cylinders. You can see here, this is the main crankcase area, push rod tubes, valve covers. Realistically, a very, very simple, well-designed engine.
The engines are internal combustion engines and work on the same basic theory as the ones you'd find in a car. However, there's a number of differences between a piston engine in an aircraft and a piston engine in an automobile.
Now, one of the differences that I see is that the cylinders here, as opposed to the cylinders in our car, have fins wrapped around them.
That's a good point. These engines are all air-cooled. The engines that we find in our cars today are water-cooled. They have a radiator, they have a water pump. The air-cooled engines are much lighter. And of course, when you're in an airplane, you're up in the air, you're flying fast. There's a lot of air moving over this engine, and it's a more efficient way to keep the engine cool.
And one of the other things, you mentioned that this has a magneto on it. If you're driving along in your car and you take the battery out, the engine stops. What happens if you take the battery out of an airplane?
Nothing. It continues to operate. That's one of the neat things about the magnetos. These are basically self-contained sparking apparatus. They are continuously sending spark to the spark plugs as long as the engine's turning over.
So the engine actually makes its own energy to generate the spark?
Makes its own energy.
And I also noticed that we can't see with a camera on both sides, but it looks like there's more than one spark plug per cylinder. What's that about?
That's right, that's right. These engines actually have 2 spark plugs per cylinder. Again, back to the safety, back to the redundancy. If one of these magnetos happens to fail, there's still another magneto, the engine will continue to operate.
When an engine is overhauled, some of the parts will be replaced and some of the parts will be reused. The engine manufacturers require some parts be replaced during overhaul, while others will be inspected and replaced only if necessary.
As an example of a part that might be reused, the crankcase, the crankshaft, internal parts like connecting rods, sometimes the cylinders are overhauled and can be reused, things like that.
So Bill, how do you get 2,000 hours of oil and grime off of these engine parts?
Well, that's an interesting process that we've developed. We use a machine which is called a MART machine, and it's actually like a giant dishwasher. It uses a 70 horsepower electric motor, high pressure hot water, and an environmentally friendly dish soap, and it just washes it just like it would wash your dishes at home in a dishwasher.
After the parts are inspected, cleaned, and replaced if necessary, the engine is reassembled. Parts that are not replaced may also be remachined if the shape has shifted over time. Once reassembled, the engines are then put through a series of tests to ensure that they're operating according to specs. For some of these tests, Penn Yan uses a complex rig called a dynamometer.
So Bill, this is like a full-on dynamometer, like you might see somebody building a race car engine and testing a race car engine. And do all aircraft engines get tested in a dynamometer before they get shipped to the customers?
Well, they do if they're here at Penn Yan Aero. We've invested a lot of time and money and effort into developing what we feel is one of the best engine testing procedures anywhere.
And what kind of things do you test in the dynamometer?
Well, basically, we're looking for everything. This is a computerized system that collects data. Not only, as everybody knows, a dynamometer reads horsepower and torque readings, but in addition, we're taking data on everything from cylinder head temperatures to exhaust gas temperatures, crankcase pressures, fuel flows, you name it, we're watching it.
Tons of instrumentation. So what do you actually do with that information you get back from the engine?
Well, a lot of it is based off of experience, but again, a lot of it goes back to the overhaul manual. And what we can do is we can compare that data to what we know to be the industry standard and make sure that we're putting out the perfect engine.
So what the customer knows is that their engine's been thoroughly tested and it's been set up and measured in all sorts of different parameters to make sure it's inspect to run on their airplane.
Precisely.
Now, all of this testing and maintenance is designed to ensure that an aircraft's engine is going to be reliable, whether you're flying by yourself or with friends and family on board. Bill knows this all too well, as he's also a pilot and a father.
There is absolutely no question whatsoever that being a pilot in the engine overhaul business is a huge benefit, not only to me to service the customer, but from the customer's aspect as well. I know what they need, I know when they need it, and I know how to make the engine perform.
Today, Bill flies a Piper Super Cub, which he's had for as long as he's been a pilot.
I first started with this airplane when I was about 15 years old. My father made the offer to me, I think more to keep me out of trouble when I was in high school than anything else. But he offered to give me the opportunity to learn how to fly. And in doing so, he went and bought this Super Cub, and I soloed in the airplane and flew in it for most of the summer. And then in the fall, we took the airplane completely apart, completely restored it, and A year later, we flew the airplane, and in 1989, I got in the airplane, went and took my private pilot's test, got my pilot's license the same day I graduated high school, and then the next morning, my father and I got in the airplane and we flew to Alaska.
Just as his father introduced him to aviation, Bill is now introducing his son to aviation.
He just loves to fly. He's like I was when I was his age. Any opportunity that we have to go flying, he's always tugging on my shirt tail, saying, "Dad, it's a nice day. We should be flying today." And he's right.
With now 4 generations of aviators, the Middlebrook family is clearly very deeply rooted in aviation and in aviation maintenance.
Well, you know, I have worked here ever since I can ever remember. I can remember my father picking me up and setting me on a stool so that I could push rocker arm bushings out of rocker arms, sweeping the floor. I worked here summers and after schools, and it's always been part of our family.
And with a potential 4th generation owning Penn Yan Aero, it's very likely things will be this way for years to come. Season 1 and Season 2 of The Aviators are now available on DVD.
Alpha Charlie 429er, clear for takeoff on runway.
For more information on today's segments, visit www.theaviators.tv. From our official home at the Whitman Regional Airport in Oshkosh, Wisconsin, we'll see you next time on The Aviators.